archive everything. Audio and I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. Well, if one mic doesn't work, I should have another. No desktop audio. Yeah. Okay. Hi again. Back for chapter 3. Maybe go into chapter 4, depending on how I survive. But yeah. Just this time I remember to put my mouse not on the side that if I have to get up, accidentally trip over it. So, Chapter 3. Say, goddess, what ensued when Raphael, the affable archangel, ... Eve. The story heard attentive, and was filled with admiration and deep muse to hear of things so high and strange. From Paradise Lost, I do not know what B stands for, 7. Yeah, actually, I've never read Paradise Lost. That would probably be on the list of things I would like to read through this, but I do not own a copy of Paradise Lost, so if I do, it would have to have been through, if I do this, it would have to be through either a library book or, I purchased myself a copy, but the whole point of this is to read them and then either, keep them or give them away. I realize I'm talking to the mic and not to the camera. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm still new to this. But, yeah, so it's, would Paradise Lost be one of the things that I read? I don't know yet. Like I said, I have to get a copy somehow. Without, spending money. Because the whole point is to, again, get rid of these. Or, if I like them enough, keep them. So, I'm already nervous. If it had really occurred to Mr. Casaubon to think of Miss Brooke as a suitable wife for him, the reasons that might induce her to accept him were already planted in her mind, and by the evening of the next day the reasons had budded and bloomed. For they had a long conversation in the morning, while Celia, who did not like the company of Mr. Casaubon's moles and sourness, had escaped to the vicarage to play with all the curate's ill-shod but merry children. Dorothea by this time had looked deep into the ungauged reservoir of Mr. Casaubon's mind, seen reflected there in vague labyrinthian extension every quality she herself brought, had opened much of her own experience to him, and had understood from him the scope of his great work. Also, of attractively labyrinthine oh God. The sentence structures. Dorothea by this time had looked deep into the ungauged reservoir of Mr. Casaubon's mind, seen reflected there in a vague labyrinthian extension every quality she herself brought, had opened much of her own experience to him, and had understood from him the scope of his great work, also of attractively labyrinthian extent. For he had been as instructive of Milton's affable archangel, and with something of the archangelic manner he told her how he had undertaken to show what indeed had been attempted before, but not with that thoroughness, justice of compassion, no, justice of comparison, and effectiveness of arrangement at which Mr. Casaubon aimed, that all the mythical systems or erratic mythical fragments in the world were corruptions of a tradition originally revealed. Okay, so he's basically saying, yeah, all of you other religions and the things of the no. You're it's all I think at this point it's particism. This is the true religion. Nothing. Oh, look. I have nothing against religion. It's when it's shoved down people's throats, or when there's someone who thinks, no, my religion is better than yours. Then, my good sir, we have a problem. Having once mastered the true position and taken a firm footing there, the vast field of mythical constructions became intelligible, nay, luminous in the reflected light of correspondences. But to gather in this great harvest the truth was no light or speedy work. His notes already made a formidable range of volumes, but the crowning task would be to condense these voluminous, still accumulating results and bring them, like the earlier vintage of Hippocratic books, to fit a little shelf. In explaining this to Dorothea, Mr. Casaubon expressed himself nearly as he would have done a fellow student, for he had not two styles of talking at command. It is true that when he used a Greek or Latin phrase, he always gave the English with scrupulous care. That is, I would never have used the word scrupulous for that. But he would probably have done this in any case. A learned provincial clergyman is accustomed to think of his acquaintances of lords, knights, and other nobles and worthy men that con Latin but little. Okay, so it read easily enough, but the spelling was not the spelling that you would think. Knights was spelled Knyghtes. Worthy was Worthi. I think con may have been misspelled a cum because it's Conne, but and little I think that's would be little. It's Lytille. Yeah. Dorothea was altogether captivated by the wide embrace of his conception. Here was something beyond the shallows of ladies' school literature. Here was a living Bossuet, whose work would reconcile complete knowledge with the devoted piety. Here was a living Bossuet. Again, I think that is a French name, and I am butchering it. I am sorry. Bossuet, whose work would reconcile complete knowledge with devoted piety. Here was a modern Augustine who united the glories of doctor and saint. The sanctity seemed no less clearly marked than the learning, for when Dorothea was impelled to open her mind on certain themes which she could speak of to no one whom she had before seen at Tipton, especially on the secondary importance of ecclesiastical forms and articles of belief compared with that spiritual religion, that submergence of self in communion with divine perfection, which seemed to her to be expressed in the best Christian books of widely distant ages. She found in Mr. Casaubon a listener who understood her at once, who could assure her of her own agreement with that view when duly tempered with wise conformity, and could mention historical examples before unknown to her. "He thinks with me," said Dorothea to herself, "or rather, he thinks a whole world, of which my thoughts is but a poor two-penny mirror. And his feelings, too, his whole experience, what a lake compared to my little pool." Miss Brooke argued from words and dispositions not less unhesitatingly than other young ladies of her age. Signs are small measurable things, but interpretations are illimitable. And in girls of sweet, ardent nature, every sign is apt to conjure up wonder, hope, belief, vast as the sky, and colored by a diffused thimbleful of matter in the shape of knowledge. Oh, I am sorry, I thought I went on to Do Not Disturb, so I didn't have Discord beeping at me all the time. I'm gonna have to get that fixed. I need to figure out why, even on Do Not Disturb mode, I get pinged. I mean, I could also put my phone on silent. It's not a big deal. It's not like my phone is ringing and I have to answer the call. They are not always too grossly deceived, for Sinbad himself may have fallen by good luck on a true description of They are not always too grossly deceived, for Sinbad himself may have fallen by good luck on a true description, and wrong reasoning sometimes lands poor mortals in right conclusion, starting a long way off the true point, and proceeding by loops and zigzags, we now and then arrive just where we ought to be. Okay, I'm sorry, this is starting to get annoying. Okay. Oh, Do Not Disturb is you will not receive any desktop notifications. It didn't say anything about phone notifications. That I would have had to turn my phone on silent. Alright, well, lesson learned. Unless I do Not Disturb on the phone. That I'll have to check later. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because I can... Ooh. Where's my tablet? Because that's the other thing. I can hear my tablet pinging. it's on this side. Okay, that now should be taken care of. No more pings. I'm a very popular dragon. Of course, I'm popular only in like the worst times, because it's just like, this is the time where everybody, I've asked everybody to not bother me, and well, no, I kid, I joke. I'm actually kind of happy people talk to me. And today I admit I did invoke some comments before I started reading that I'm like, hey, I found something. Here's a little Discord ping, like I told, you know. And yeah. So my fault. That's fine. I was just like, I had thought I'd done something. I had thought I saw it. Bah! Mine faster than mouth. I had thought I had done something, and I did do something, but it only blocked the noise from the computer, not the phone and tablet. So, again, should be fixed now. Wait, oh. Because Miss Brooke was hasty in her trust, it is not therefore clear that Mr. Casaubon was unworthy of it. He stayed a little longer than he had intended, on a slight pressure of invitation from Mr. Brooke, who offered no bait except his own documents on machine breaking and wick burning. Mr. Casaubon was called into the library to look at these in a heap, while his host picked up first one, then the other to read aloud from in a skipping and uncertain way, passing from one unfinished passage to another with a yes, now, but here, and finally pushing them all aside to open the journal of his youthful continental travels. Oh, that sounds like me. Oh. Yeah, I would most likely do that. I would just be all like, oh, but what about this book? Open it up, read something, and then I was like, no, this one. Speaking of which, I am going to completely upset my setup right now, but I will get to this later at on YouTube. You will when I finish it, but I'm gonna plug it a little first now, because I can, and again, we were talking about switching subjects in the middle of a conversation. For the love of Godzilla, please read this book. It is hilarious. So, yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, this is one book that we'll eventually get to if the name is pulled. Did I ever mention about how I'm going to be picking the next book after we finish? Not the whole clunker. I'm not reading this whole clunker in one sitting for you guys, but I'm probably going to go to about... Because so, as I said in the first video, on my first stream, this is broken up into separate like little mini books because it was originally serialized. And then later on, obviously, they put it in one big brick. So after I finish this last bit right here, curse lighting, I am going to pull from this little thing a couple of names of other books that I have around. Mostly most of them should be here around me, so I'm not obviously jumping up and trying to find them on my shelves. And I'll put it to vote. Now, if no one votes, yes, I'll pick for myself which one I would like to read first. And a few of these are actually books that I'll have to get from the library. So while I'm waiting for one of those library books to come in, I might do something like, I don't know, read a little more of this. I don't know. The thing is I don't want to start a book, then put it aside and read another one halfway through. Again, with this being the exception, because not everybody can remember things that happen halfway through a book. Like, they've got so many other things going on that they can't remember the plot lines of 3 books, and so I don't want to no Lord Shenanigans. Again, as I said, I didn't know that Discord's Do Not Disturb is only for the desktop, not for the Switch and phone. I just see your notification now. So yeah, not everybody can remember the plot lines of 3 books in one go. So I don't want to like start, say, something like, okay, this one's a short one, but if I'm halfway through it and then get the library book, I'm immediately going to stop the library book because, you know, I have to return it at the end of the day. Well, at the end of the time allotted. And I don't want to I don't know. If I pull a library book, I will obviously request it right then and there if that's the one that I choose. But this is just me experimenting. And yeah. So I'm not going to open this up. I'm not going to pull any books out yet because you saw I still have a ways to go. And lately I've only done 2 chapters so far when we're not even halfway through chapter 3. So, not even halfway through chapter 3. So, I'm rambling. Oh, yeah, that's... By the way, Lord Shenanigans, can you hear me when I talk like this? Or should I speak directly into the microphone? Which one does it sound better? I am sorry. I am hungry. I'm a hungry dragon. Okay, sweet. Alright, then so I can actually now... Yeah. Okay, so I will actually now sit this way. Look here. Here is all about Greece. Rhamnus, the ruins of Rhamnus. You are a great Grecan now. I don't know whether you have given much study to the topography. I spent no end of time in making out these things. Halcyon, now, here, now. We started the next morning for Parnassus, the double-peaked Parnassus. And this volume is about Greece, you know. Mr. Brooke wound up, rubbing his thumb transversely along the edges of the leaves as he held the book forward. Mr. Casaubon made a dignified, though somewhat sad audience, bowed in the right places, and avoided looking at anything documentary as far as possible, without showing disregard or impatience. Mindful that this desultoriness was associated with the institutions of the country, and that the man who took him on this severe mental scamper was not only an amiable host, but a landholder and custos rotulorum. Justice of the peace, who is the keeper of public records. Okay. I have to remember, this was written in the 1800s. Yeah, now I can see what if Spanish and Italian come from Latin. French, I have no fucking clue. I'm still trying to figure that out. Was his endurance aided also by the reflection that Mr. Brooke was the uncle of Dorothea? Certainly he seemed more and more bent on making her talk to him, on drawing her out, as Celia remarked to herself, and in looking at her, his face was often lit up by a smile like pale wintry sunshine. But he left the next morning, and was taking a pleasant walk with Miss Brooke along the gravelled terrace. He had mentioned to her that he felt the disadvantage of loneliness, and the need of that cheerful companionship with which the presence of youth can lighten or vary the serious toils of maturity. He delivered this statement with as much careful precision as if he had been a diplomatic envoy whose words would be attended with results. What? Okay, I get part of the sentence. With as much careful precision as if he had been a diplomatic envoy whose words would be attended with results. Okay, I get it a little now. And, okay, hold on one moment. Just gonna plug that in so I don't lose power to my laptop. Indeed, Mr. Casaubon was not used to expect that he should have to repeat or revise his communications of a partial or personal kind. Okay, so he was just like, I'm the type of person who needs to say this something once, and everybody will get exactly what I say. The inclinations which he had deliberately stated on the 2nd of October, he would think it enough to refer to by the mention of the date, judging by the standard of his own memory, which was a volume where the vide serpa could serve instead of repetitions, and not the ordinary long-used blotting books, which only tells of forgotten writing. But in his case, Mr. Casaubon's confidence was not likely to be falsified, for Dorothea heard and retained what he said with the eager interest of a fresh, young nature to which every variety and experience is an epoch. It was 3 o'clock in the beautiful, breezy autumn day when Mr. Casaubon drove off to his rectory at Lowick, only 5 miles from Tipton, and Dorothea, who had on her bonnet and shawl, hurried along the shrubbery and across the park, that she might wander through the bordering woods with no other visible companionship than that of Monk, the great Saint Bernard dog, who always took care of the young ladies in their walks. There had risen before her the girl's vision of a possible future for herself, to which she looked forward with trembling hope, and she wanted to wander on in that visionary future without interruption. She walked briskly in the brisk air. The color rose in her cheek, and her straw bonnet, which our contemporaries might look at with conjectural curiosity as at an obsolete form of basket, fell a little backward. She would perhaps be hardly characterized enough if it were omitted that she wore her brown hair flatly braided and coiled behind so as to expose the outline of her head in a daring manner at a time when public feeling required the meagerness of nature to be dissimulated by tall barricades of frizzed curls and bows, never surpassed by any great race except the Fijian. Sorry, that was work. It was not important. This was a trait of Miss Brooks' asceticism. I know this word. I can see it in my mind. I know this word, but I cannot say it. Asceticism. Okay. This was a trait of Miss Brooks' asceticism. But there was nothing of an aesthetic expression in her bright full eyes as she looked before her, not consciously seeing but absorbing into the intensity of her mood the solemn glory of the afternoon with its long swaths of light between the far-off rows of limes whose shadows touched each other. All people, young or old, that is, all people in those anti-reform times, would have thought her an interesting object if they had referred the glow in her eyes and cheek to the newly awakened ordinary image of young love. The illusions of Chloe about Stefan. Okay, apparently those at that time were names that people used in poetry about love. Chloe and Stefan. I'm gonna have to keep that for later. Let me just, do I have? No, I do not. Not here. One moment. Oop. Yeah. I might use those names. That's why I'm mocking them. Okay. Okay. The illusions of Chloe about Stefan have been sufficiently consecrated in poetry as the pathetic loveliness of all spontaneous trust ought to be. Miss Pippin, adoring young pumpkin, and the dreaming along endless vistas of unwearying companionship was a little drama which never tired our fathers and mothers, and had been put into all costumes. Let but Pumpkin have a figure which would sustain the disadvantages of the short-waisted swallowtail, and everybody felt it not only natural but necessary to the perfection of womanhood that a sweet girl should be at once convinced of his virtue and his exceptional ability, and above all his perfect sincerity. but perhaps no persons then living, certainly none in the neighborhood of Tipton, would have a sympathetic understanding of the dreams of a girl whose notions about marriage took their color entirely from an exalted enthusiasm about the ends of life. An enthusiasm which was lit chiefly by its own fire and included neither the niceties of the trousseau, the pattern of plate, nor even the honors and sweet joys of the blooming matron. The one reason why I could never finish this book every time I tried it, even back when I had to read this in college, or again using like an audio, I was listen and read along at the same time. Dorothea annoys the ever-living shit out of me. She's an aesthetic monk without being an aesthetic monk and doing it for all the wrong reasons because she doesn't understand it. And she's dragging her poor sister along with it. Because again, going back to, what is it, I think it's The Taming of the Shrew, the older sister has to get married before the younger sister can, because that's just how things are done. Granted, this book itself, because again, even though I didn't read it for school, I did pay attention in those classes, so I know that it's just, this is supposed to be like a vast panorama of life in the provincial Midlands town. At the story center stands the intellectual and idealistic Dorothea Book. Yeah, so it's basically, this book is a comedy of errors, I think, for lack of better terms. It's just really hard to enjoy a comedy of errors when you don't like the main character. It had now entered Dorothea's mind that Mr. Casaubon might wish to make her his wife, and the idea that he would do so touched her with a sort of reverential gratitude. How good of him! Nay, it would be almost as if a winged messenger had suddenly stood beside her path and held out his hand towards her. For a long while she had been oppressed by the indefinitiveness which hung in her mind like a thick summer haze over all that her desire to make her life greatly effective. What could she do? What ought she do? She hardly more than a budding woman, but yet with an active conscience and a great mental need, not to be satisfied by girlish instruction comparable to the nibblings and judgments of discursive and the nibblings and judgment of a discursive mouse. With some endowment of stupidity and conceit, she might have thought that a Christian young lady of fortune should find her ideal of life in village charities, patronage of a humble clergy, of the pursuit of the female scripture characters, unfolding at the private experience of Sarah under the old dispensation, and Dorcas under the new, and the care of her soul over her embroidery in her boudoir, with a background of prospective marriage to a man who, if less strict than herself, as being involved in affairs religiously inexplicable, might be prayed for and seasonably exhorted. From such contentment poor Dorothea was shut out. The intensity of her religious disposition, the coercion of its existence over her life, the coercion of it exercised over her life, was but one aspect of a nature altogether ardent, theoretic, and intellectually consequent. And with such a nature struggling in the bands of a narrow teaching, hemmed in by a social life which seemed nothing but a labyrinth of petty courses, a walled-in maze of small paths that led nowhither, the outcome was sure to strike others as at once exaggeration and inconsistency. The thing which seemed to her best, she wanted to justify by the complete knowledge, and not to live in a pretended admission of rules which were never acted on. Into this soul hunger, as yet all her youthful passion was poured. The union which attracted her was one that would deliver her from her girlish subjection to hold on. Into this soul hunger, as yet all her youthful passion was poured. The union which attracted her was one that would deliver her from her girlish subjection to her own ignorance, and give her the freedom of voluntary submission to a guide who would take her along the grandest path. Dorothea is not like other girls. You know, it's funny, but she's got the things that I would admire in a not like other girls. Like, oh, I don't want to conform to the narrowness of my being a woman, and this, I think it's Regency time, Europe, or England, I should say, Regency England. I want to learn, I want to know more than what is normal for a girl, but oh my fucking god, it's the religious thing. It's just, as I stated earlier, I have nothing against religion, but when it's like the whole thing of the character, I just can't. I should learn everything then, she said to herself, still walking quickly along that vital road through the wood. It would be my duty to study, that I might help him the better in his great works. There would be nothing trivial about our lives. Everyday things with us would mean the greatest things. It would be like marrying Pascal. I should learn to see the truth by the same light as great men have seen it. And then I should know what to do when I got older. I should see how it was possible to lead a grand life here, now, in England. I don't feel sure about doing good in any way now. Everything seems like going on a mission to a people whose language I don't know, unless it were building good cottages. There can be no doubt about that. Oh, I hope I should be able to get the people well housed in Lerwick. I will draw plenty of plans while I have the time. Dorothea checked herself, settling with a self-rebuke of the presumptuous way in which she was reckoning on uncertain events. But she was spared any inward effort to change the direction of her thoughts by the appearance of a cantering horseman round a turning of the road. the well-groomed chestnut horse and two beautiful setters would bleh, 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 bleh. The well-groomed chestnut horse and two beautiful setters could leave no doubt that the rider was Sir James Chatham. He discerned Dorothea, jumped off his horse at once, and having delivered it to his groom, advanced towards her with something white on his arm, at which the two setters were barking at it in an excited manner. "How delightful to meet you, Miss Brooke," he said, raising his hat and showing his sleekly waving blonde hair. "It has hastened the pleasure I was looking forward to." Miss Brooke was annoyed at the interruption. This amiable baronet, really a suitable husband for Celia, exaggerated the necessities of making himself agreeable to the elder sister. Even a prospective brother-in-law may be an oppression if he will always be presupposing to good and understanding with you, and agreeing with you even when you contradict him. The thought that he had made the mistake of paying his address to himself could not take shape. All her mental activity was used up in persuasions of another kind. But he was positively obtrusive at this moment, and his dimpled hands were quite distinguishable. Her roused temper made her color deeply, as she returned his greeting with some haughtiness. Sir James interpreted the heightened color in the way most gratifying to himself, and thought he never saw Miss Brooke looking so handsome. "I have brought a little petitioner," he said, "or rather, I brought him to see if he will be approved before his petition is offered. He showed the white object under his arms, which was a tiny Maltese puppy, one of nature's most naive toys. "It is painful to me to see these creatures that are bred merely as pets," said Dorothea, whose opinions was forming itself that very moment. Those opinions will, under the heat of irritation. "Oh? Why?" said James, as they walked forward. "I believe all the petting that is given them does not make them happy. They are too helpless. Their lives are too frail. A weasel or mouse that gets its own living is more interesting. I like to think that the animals about us have souls something like our own, neither carry on their own little affairs or can be companions to us, like Monk here. Those creatures are parasitic." "I am glad to know that you do not like them," the good Sir Chatham said. "I should never keep them for myself, but ladies usually are fond of these Maltese dogs. Here, John, take this dog, will you?" "I want a Maltese." I mean, they kind of are bred to be doing that. God damn it, Dorothea! The objectionable puppy, whose nose and eyes were equally black and expressive, was thus got rid of, since Miss Brooke decided that it had better not have been born. But she felt it necessary to explain. "You must not judge of Celia's feelings from mine. I think she likes these small pets. She had a tiny terrier once, which she was very fond of. It made me unhappy because I was afraid of treading on it. I'm rather short-sighted." "You have your own opinion about everything, Miss Brooke, and it is always a good opinion. What answer was possible to such stupid complimenting? Do you know I envy you that," Sir James said, as they continued walking at the rather brisk pace set by Dorothea. I don't quite understand what you mean." "Your power of forming an opinion. I can form an opinion of persons. I know when I like people. But about other matters, do you know, I have often a difficulty in deciding. One hears very sensible things said on opposite sides. Or that seems sensible. Perhaps we don't always discriminate between sense and nonsense. Dorothea felt she was rather rude. Yes, bitch, you are. Exactly, said Sir James. You have seemed to have the power of discrimination. On the contrary, I am often unable to decide. But that is from ignorance. The right conclusion is there all the same, though I am unable to see it. I think there are few who would see it more readily. Do you know Lovegood was telling me yesterday that you had the best notion in the world of a plan for cottages. Quite wonderful for a young lady, he thought. You had a real genius, to use his expression. He said you wanted Mr. Brooke to build... Okay, no, this is on me. He said you wanted Mr. Brooke to build a new set of cottages, but he seemed to think it hardly probable that your uncle would consent. Do you know that it is one of the things I wish to do? I mean on my own estate. I should be so glad to carry out that plan of yours, if you let me see it. Of course, it is sinking money. That is why people object to it. Laborers can never pay rent to make it answer. But after all, it is worth doing. Worth doing? Yes, indeed, Dorothea said, energetically forgetting her previous small vexation. I think we deserve to be beaten out of our beautiful houses with a scourge of small cords. All of us who let tenants live in such sties as we see round us. Life in cottages might be happier than ours, if they were real houses fit for human beings, from whom we expected duties and affections. Will you show me your plans? Yes, certainly. I dare say it is very faulty, but I have been examining all the plans for cottages in London's book, and picked out what seems the best things. Oh, what a happiness it would be to set the pattern about here. I think, instead of Lazarus at the gate, we should put the pigsty cottages outside the park gate. Dorothea was in the best temper now. Sir James, as brother-in-law, building model cottages on his estate, and the perhaps others being built at Lerwick, and more elsewhere in imitation. It would be as if the spirit of Oberlin had passed over the parishes to make the life of poverty beautiful. Sir James saw all the plans and took one away to consult upon with Lovegood. He also took away a complacent sense that he was making great progress in Miss Brooke's good opinion. The Maltese puppy was not offered to Cecilia, an omission which Dorothea afterwards thought of with surprise, but she blamed herself for it. She had been engrossing Sir James. After all, it was a relief that there was no puppy to tread upon. Okay, so at least she was understanding of the fact that she might accidentally step on the poor thing, but still. Celia was present while the plans were being examined and observed Sir James' illusion. He thinks that Dodo cares about him, and she only cares about her plans. Yet I am not certain that she would refuse him if she thought he would let her manage everything and carry out all her notions. And how very uncomfortable Sir James would be. I cannot bear notions. It was Celia's private luxury to indulge in this dislike. She dared not confess it to her sister in any direct statement, for that would be laying herself open to a demonstration that she was somehow or other at war with all goodness. But on safe opportunity she had an indirect mode of making her negative wisdom tell upon Dorothea, and calling her down from her despotic mood by reminding her that people were staring, not listening. Celia was not impulsive. What she had to say could wait, and came from her away with the same quiet staccato evenness. When people talk with energy and emphasis, she watched their faces and features merely. She can never understand how well-bred persons consented to sing and open their mouths in the ridiculous manner requisite for that vocal exercise. It was not many days before Mr. Casaubon paid a morning visit, on which he was invited again for the following week to dine and stay the night. Thus Dorothea had 3 more conversations with him, and was convinced that her first impressions had been just. He was all that she had first imagined him to be. Almost everything she had said seemed like a specimen from a mine, or the inscription on the door of a museum which might open on the treasures of past ages. And this trust in his mental wealth was all the deeper and more effective in her inclinations, because it was now obvious that his visits were made for her sake. This accomplished man consented to think of a young girl, and make the pains to talk with her, not without absurd compliment, but with an appeal to her understanding, and sometimes with instructive correction. What delightful companionship! What delightful companionship! Mr. Casaubon seemed even unconscious that trivialities existed, and never handed round that small talk of heavy men which is as acceptable as stale bride cake brought forth with an odor of which is acceptable as stale bride cake brought forth with an odor of cupboard. He talked of what he was interested in, or else he was silent and bowed with sad civility. To Dorothea this was affordable genuineness, and religious abstinence from the artificiality which uses up the soul in the efforts of pretense. For she looked as reverently at Mr. Casaubon's religious elevation above herself as she did at his intellect and learning. He assented to her expressions of devout feeling, and usually with an appropriate quotation. He allowed himself to say that he had gone through some spiritual conflicts in his youth. In short, Dorothea saw that here she might reckon on understanding, sympathy, and guidance. On one, and only one, of her favorite themes she was disappointed. Mr. Casaubon apparently did not care about building cottages, and diverted the talk to an extremely narrow accommodation, which was to be had in the dwellings of the ancient Egyptians, as if to check a too high standard. After he was gone, Dorothea dwelt with some agitation on this indifference of his, and her mind was much exercised with arguments drawn from the varying conditions of climate which modify human needs, and from the admitted wickedness of pagan despots. Could she not urge these arguments on Mr. Casaubon when he came again? But further reflection told her that she was presumptuous in demanding his attention to such a subject. He would not disapprove of her occupying herself with it in leisure moments, as other women expected to occupy themselves with their dress and embroidery, would not forbid it, when Dorothea felt rather ashamed she had detected in herself these speculations. But her uncle had been invited to go to Lowick to stay a couple of days, and it was reasonable to suppose that Mr. Casaubon delighted in Mr. Brooke's society for its own sake, either with or without documents. Okay, now that was, But her uncle had been invited to go to Lowick to stay a couple of days. Was it reasonable to suppose that Mr. Casaubon delighted in Mr. Brooke's society for its own sake, whether with or without documents. Meanwhile, that little disappointment made her delight the more in Sir James Chetham's readiness to set on foot the desired improvements. He came much oftener than Mr. Casaubon, and Dorothea ceased to find him disagreeable, since he showed himself so entirely in earnest, for he had already entered with much practical ability into Lovegood's estimates, and was charmingly docile. She proposed to build a couple of cottages, and transfer 2 families from their old cabins, which could then be pulled down, so that new ones could be built on the old site. Sir James said exactly, and she bore the word remarkably well. Certainly these men who had so few spontaneous ideas might be very useful members of society under good feminine direction, if they were fortunate in choosing their sister-in-law. It was difficult to say whether there was or was not a little wistfulness in her continually blind to the possibility that another sort of choice was in question in relation to her. But her life was just now full of hope and action, and she was not only thinking of her plans, but getting down learned books from the library and reading many things hastily, that she might be a little less ignorant in talking to Mr. Casaubon, all the while being visited with conscientious questionings whether she were not exalting these poor doings above measure, and contemplating them with that self-satisfaction which was the last doom of ignorance and folly. Right. I had hoped to try to go to chapter 4, but nope. Again, it's just too much of a headache trying to read this. Alright, well, thank you for listening and sticking around. I will see you next time.